Welcome to the video for lesson 5 of Discovery. We're going to talk about this lesson that's called Love is Offered. And in this lesson, and this is a really important lesson in this study, we're going to be inviting people to receive the gift of a relationship with Jesus, the gift of salvation that he's offering, a new relationship with God. And we're going to talk about some common barriers that people face in embracing that relationship with Jesus. So, Holly, let's talk about some of the dispositions that we're seeing in our participants as we come into this lesson.
So coming from lesson 4 last week, we discovered the bridge analogy where Jesus bridges the gap between us and God. And there was a lot of excitement and wow, I've never heard that before, happening in our group. So as leaders, you can expect that your participants will return with excitement and stories from them having shared the bridge analogy with people. They might even have encountered obstacles in the lives of their friends as they shared the bridge. Like, what do you mean that's what he did? Well, what does that mean for my life? Like they're already engaging in some missionary activity. So that's really exciting energy coming into our group this week. And of course, for ourselves as leaders, this is the climax of the entire Discovery study is this lesson. So we've been anticipating it. We've been building every piece of the kerygma that we've been proclaiming all of the way along is to end here. And you really want to be covering this lesson in prayer personally, and maybe even asking friends to pray for you and to pray for your participants as you dive in. A couple other tips I'd give for your intentional accompaniment this week is to remember your own initial conversion. I mean, we talk, in missionary formation, we'll often say, remember that you once were lost. Remember what it felt like to not understand everything. And going back maybe to your first testimony that you ever wrote or journals from when you were first discovering who Jesus was can be a great rediscovery for you and a great formative piece, and will bring you, coming here with great humility into this lesson.
And joy, right?
Yes.
Because and a sense of anticipation, because this was an important moment for me, whether or not it was in a discovery study or somewhere else, but you're remembering, I've encountered Christ. I remember what it was like. And then to have that excitement as you go into this lesson going, I know what I'm inviting you to. And this is the greatest thing. And we should have this sense of joy. And as you said, if we go back to our own conversion and those key moments in our lives where we've made decisions for Christ and remember that and allow that to inflame us. So it's going to help us to lead this lesson well. Your excitement will be contagious.
It will be contagious, and it definitely reminds you that it's so ordinary. Like it's another faith study. It's another program that's been prepared for me today, but it's actually extraordinary. What you're going to do in that small group might look really ordinary. It's a couple books, a couple questions, some scriptures, but it's life changing. It's a transformative lesson, and carrying that in you as you lead will be really important. Michael, the leader guide tells us that one of the biggest, focal points of the study is actually looking at the relationships diagram. How do we navigate that section?
This is one of the, I think, greatest features of the Discovery Faith Study is these relationship diagrams, because they give such a clear, concise way of understanding what it means to be in a relationship with Jesus. And one of the great things about it is that it's a self-assessment tool. You're not telling your participants, I think you're in the first image or the second image or the third image. It's them really being able to wrestle with their own the own state of their spiritual life, their own relationship with Jesus, and say, where do I think I am right now? And really, those are the two important questions we're going to ask them. And is where's your relationship with Jesus right now, and where would you like it to be? And we usually put that in the context of those images, say which image best represents your relationship with Jesus right now. That's a great question for them. And then we just let that sit. And I like to think of it too, that, heaven is on edge at this moment because the way they respond to these questions, has a great determination on where they're going to go next in their spiritual life. So, I'm anticipating like their guardian angels, their patron saints. They're on edge at this moment because they're going, just say yes, just say yes. The Holy Spirit is moving in their hearts, saying, just say yes. And so we can again have that anticipation as well, and know that this is not just a minor moment. This is a major moment in this person's life. This is a milestone that hopefully they're going to look back to and say, that was a moment where things changed for me. And so we ask, where do you find yourself right now? What image best represents your relationship? But then what image do you want to represent your relationship? And this is that moment where they can say, I want to say yes. I want to say yes to a Christ-centered relationship. but it's all on them. It's all this self-assessment, but it's clear. And as you're leading this, the temptation can be that you want to put your own spin on it, find a different way to explain it. We really recommend, even for the most seasoned discovery leaders, just read the text. The text, we've worked on it over and over again, and in many, many different settings. So as you're leading people through the explanation of these diagrams, just read what's there. They can follow along with you, but it's the easiest, it's the most succinct way to make sure that you say all the things that need to be said without anything extra. So we highly recommend that as you're...
And in these sections, and actually kind of throughout lesson 5, you'll likely find as a leader that they're quieter. Like our participants are processing. That's not a bad sign. That doesn't mean they're not interested just because there's not a lot of chit chat happening. Or this is a very reflective, introspective lesson, and they are processing. You will get to unpack a lot in the lesson 5 follow-up, which comes after this, but it's okay. Basically, just giving you that freedom that if they're reflecting on, where are you at? Where do you want to be with Jesus, and they're quieter, you're not going, oh my gosh, what's wrong? And am I offending? Or some of those insecurities can actually bubble up and distract us, just as we're leading.
And it can be great rule of thumb. We were always taught as young missionaries to have the rule of thumb that when there's a silence, kind of wait till you feel uncomfortable and then count another 5 seconds after that, because probably you'll feel uncomfortable a little bit after they will. And if you just leave that space, probably somebody will speak up.
Good point.
So, and this is, especially at this moment, let the silence sit there. Let them
process. Pray for them. When it's quiet, just come, Holy Spirit. Come and help them feel comfortable. Just praying for them.
So, also just want to mention as well that if you want to read more about understanding the relationships diagrams, check the appendix. I think on page 145, you'll find we'll have a little bit more in-depth explanation than what we do in the lesson itself. That'll be really helpful for your preparation. Now, one of the other things we talk about in this lesson is we talk about some common barriers that people face. We talk about the scale of perfection. We talk about the fear of failure and the fear of change. So Holly, share with us a little bit about why those are so important to talk about.
Yes, I'm really glad that they've been, in the new edition of Discovery, added right into the lesson, because sort of before, when something is put into appendix, it kind of feels like, well, you might need to refer to this, and we're not sure, but we were all referring to it. It was actually becoming central to how we walked through the images and the relationships diagram with our participants, central to how we navigated their barriers. And we actually discovered the barriers were so common that it's titled Common Barriers and Obstacles. So we took it out of the appendix and out of this other conversation and put it right here in the small group in an attempt to help you as a leader build off of the group's ability to process that obstacle. So some of them, actually, scale of perfection would be one. So what does it mean to, take a look at our relationship with Jesus in light of a scale of perfection? Everyone in the group is kind of going, you thought that? Well, I thought that too. Oh, we all thought that? Wow, this is so disarming. This is a universal experience. It's not just me that was intimidated in this way. And there's a sense of oh, okay.
It kind of puts people at ease, right?
It puts them at ease.
And knowing that it's not just me that's experiencing this barrier, that actually lots of people do. And by naming it, it helps them be able to deal with it more, instead of maybe burying it and saying, well, I probably shouldn't be struggling with this, so I'm not going to talk about it, kind of out of fear of what everybody else might think about me.
That's right. And getting it, the quicker we can equip you as a leader to work through barriers, work through obstacles, reach the hardest of the heart, is the better place of conversation for you, the better effective place for you in your intentional accompaniment. So we've discovered in arranging it this way, we do accomplish. We cover a lot of ground in the group, and then it's even more excellent and more potent, the conversation that you get to have with them in the lesson 5 follow-up.
And this will now, as you mentioned, the lesson 5 follow-up. So this lesson is leading us into that lesson 5 follow-up. So this is the one-on-one meeting that you should be making with every person who's in your discovery study. It's really important that we make sure we actually take the time to have a one-on-one conversation with each person. So don't leave the end of lesson 5 without having discussed the scheduling of those meetings with your people. Ideally, get it all scheduled before everybody leaves from that day. And if not, really follow up fast, because the longer you wait to get the scheduling, the more likely it is you won't do it. But it's actually a required part of this study, because it's such an important conversation. We're going to actually, in that conversation, give that personal invitation to say yes to Jesus. So we're going to lead right up to that point in the lesson here. We're even going to ask them the questions, what do you want? Do you want to have a personal relationship with Jesus? But we're going to stop short of actually praying with everybody in the lesson, because there's always this personal dimension to this. This is such a personal question that it deserves individual attention.
We respect that. There's like a sacredness around that
Yes.
reflection and that taking the time, that we don't want to rush and we don't want there to be pressure, right?
That's right. That's right. And so instead of trying to do it in the group setting, we do it one-on-one so that everybody gets that individual attention. You can deal with their individual concerns and difficulties right there, and then you can pray with them. And we're going to have a whole video about how to do that follow-up. So we encourage you to set that follow-up up and then watch the video so that you're prepared to be able to walk with them through that.
That's right. So as we end the actual leading of the small group of lesson 5, the reflection challenge is that they would further pray and reflect on what might be holding them back from a relationship with Jesus. So it's setting the tone for that conversation. You might want to consider as well as leaders to skip a week of leading a formal small group, like not to plan on leading lesson 6 and doing your lesson 5 follow-ups. You might want to take a break of the gathered time so that you can have more room in your schedule to meet the individuals. And head over to your journal and write the things that you observed, write some areas you might want to be praying for greater freedom, a release of different barriers that were named, so that you can have an even more effective conversation in the follow-up.
So ideally, those follow-ups should be done before you do lesson 6. So we'll recommend that the next video you watch is the one on the lesson 5 follow-up, and we'll look forward to talking to you then.